Welcome back to CVM Live. It's now time for the major stories in detail. And in a CVM Live exclusive, at least 5 persons are now in search of a new place to rent after being unable to gain entrance to a residence for which they claim was already paid for. As CVM Live's Nicole Wilson reports, the alleged landlord is nowhere to be found.
It was a room for rent, but a case of a missing landlord. On Thursday, 2 persons turned up at a residence in Kingston and St. Andrew with the intention of occupying the space, only to find out that they were victims of a scam. One of the victims, who spoke to CVM Live under the condition of anonymity, says it all began when he responded to an online advertisement.
I saw an ad on the Jamaica classified online website. There was a place renting at 2 Avenue, Burnett Avenue for $22 per month. I made contact with the person, and the person got the details and everything sent over, and the person made contact and everything with me.
The prospective landlord eventually met with the affected individual and carried him on a viewing of the house, which he told him was owned by his brother.
His brother is overseas, and his brother seems not to be coming back to Jamaica, so his brother gave him permission to rent the place and do whatever he wants to do with the money. So I agreed to take the place, and I paid the deposit, I paid the rent in full. That's part of $4,000.
Revealing that more persons were affected by this scam, he is making a concerted effort to get justice.
I made contact with the 24 police station, reported them out and everything, and they did some investigations. And when they went to the area, take the name of the person and everything, they realized that he was living there under a fake name of Errol Lewis. He also presented Errol Lewis' ID and sharing information to the tenant when he was living there, because he could have paid his rent and all of that. Well, news has it so far, apart from the guy and I that were caught on the scam, there were 3 more other persons as well.
Nicole Wilson, CVM Live.
South St. Andrew was plunged into mourning following the murder of one of its own, allegedly by another member of the community, as an ongoing feud between residents once again turned violent. Here's Joel Croskill with the report.
It's alleged that gang warfare has snuffed out another life in South St. Andrew. The latest slaying claiming the life of 46-year-old mechanic Kurth Rainford while he relaxed in his bed. Reports that gunman descended on an address at Raphael Avenue next to Ramsey Road off Maxfield Avenue. But rather than kicking off the door and forcing entry into the premises, the gunmen instead placed the muzzle of their gun through the window and shot Mr. Rainsford several times in his upper chest. He is survived by 5 children.
Have a look at things in, tell the truth. Right now them say they need peace meeting in the community. Such here at Solar Street, Ramsey Road and Raphael Avenue and Zimbabwe. All places need to meet, and no one showing up from Solar Street, from Zimbabwe, Swetna, Whitfield and Fitzgerald Avenue, and them teaming up at night time before they come kill off people in them house and kill my brother in them house watching TV this month before they. And Mark Bowling-Jack Peace has called me and said they want to meet them in the area. The ladies alone a turn, show up themselves. No one from Solar Street, no one man from Solar Street, no man from people from Zimbabwe, no one from Swetna. What kind of meeting peace they want?
There has been ongoing tension between residents of Ramsey Road, Sunlight Street and Zimbabwe, and residents are calling on their political representatives to intervene in the feud.
Mark Bowling and the whole of the bigger head them need to come in the community about march, peace, march, meeting with everybody from Solar Street, Whitfield, Swetna and Fitzgerald Avenue top. Right now it now got done.
Joel Croskill, CVM Live.
Thanks, Joel. Detectives from the Narcotics Division have arrested a major player in the illegal drugs for guns trade and have seized just under 500 pounds of ganja during an operation in the St. Catharines South Division on Sunday. Reports indicate that an anti-narcotics operation was carried out in the division after a Toyota Noah motor vehicle was signaled to stop at the intersection along Lakes Penn Municipal Boulevard. A search of the vehicle was conducted and 9 knitted bags containing 43 parcels with compressed ganja found. The driver was arrested and the ganja and vehicle seized. The driver will be interviewed in the presence of his attorney before charges are laid. And the drugs have an estimated street value of over 1.9 million Jamaican dollars. In a CVM Live update, the Harbourview Police is reporting that at least one person has come forward to claim a motorbike, which is among the items recovered in an operation carried out on Saturday. The operation, which took place in the Melbrook Heights of the community, saw the recovery of cell phones, tablets, laptop computers and other assorted electronics. These items are thought to have been stolen. The police are reiterating their call for persons with the relevant documentation to come in and identify their property. Jamaica has been rated as the third most exposed to multiple hazards by the World Bank. And that's the word from the Director General of the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM, who is now calling for more to be done in disaster risk management. CVM Live's Khadija Thomas with this report.
Just 4 days into the hurricane season, and ODPEM's Director General Major Clive Davis says 87.7% of the population is at risk from 3 or more hazards. He says we have to take steps to ensure that our response and recovery is on target.
Between 2000 and 2017, the country was impacted by some 15 or so hydrometeorological events. It cost us 128 billion Jamaican dollars in losses.
Speaking at a panel discussion at the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, Major Davis notes that Jamaica has a disaster risk management network, but it requires the participation of all the relevant stakeholders to be more effective.
Every parish must have a disaster risk management committee that must meet, take care of mitigation, take care of preparation, take care of response, and take care of recovery. It is when those systems are overwhelmed that the coordinating body called the ODPEM comes into play.
The Director General adds that for this Atlantic hurricane season, which runs from June 1 through November 30, there could be 1 to 4 major hurricanes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are not even looking at that data. What we know is that we're in the hurricane season, and we know that it takes an afternoon of rain to adversely impact us. We don't have to wait for a tropical storm. We don't have to wait for a hurricane. It takes an afternoon of rain. And it means, therefore, that we have to keep that at the forefront and ensure that all our preparations are in line with that fact.
Khadija Thomas, CVM Live.
Thank you, Khadija. Executive Director for the Public Investment Management Secretariat, PIMSEC, says the Public Investment Management System, PIMS, is actively in operation since its implementation. The web-based system screens project proposals from ministries, departments and agencies to ensure that they are feasible and aligned with the development objectives of the country. Here's Vaughn Thorpe, and he has the report.
According to Executive Director for the Public Investment Management Secretariat, PIMSEC, Douglas Livermore, there has been strong and robust use of the Public Investment Management System, PIMS, and compliance is encouraging. Livermore adds that the Secretariat is now looking at a more strategic approach to the pursuit of public investment projects,
which is now the common framework for the preparation, appraisal, approval and management of all public investments in Jamaica, irrespective of the source of funding or procurement and implementation modalities.
Livermore, however, added that less than 18% of public sector agencies are non-compliant with the legislation, and pointed out that projects put forward by these entities run the risk of not being funded.
As a country, great emphasis is placed on public investments as a means of delivering key public services and serving as a catalyst for economic growth and sustainable development. However, over the years, the benefits have not been optimized due to the poor performance of our public investment projects.
With many competing demands for financing, prioritizing investment projects is crucial. Under the system, Livermore cites there will be adequate tracking of projects.
Through the PIMS, it is hoped that careful selection, sourcing of funding and scheduling of public investment projects will be done, ensuring that the people of Jamaica receive value for money.
He also advised that every project that goes through the system must have the endorsement of the permanent secretary in the portfolio ministry. Approximately 130 projects have been dealt with through PIMS since its implementation in 2014. Vaughan Thorpe, CVM Live.
Ashley and Foster. Ashley, good start to the week.
Is it a good start to the week?
What's the start of the week?
It's a great start to the week, everybody. We are so happy to have you here for another Monday night edition of CVM Live on CVM Television. We hope that you've had a very wonderful and pleasant weekend, but we're happy to be back in your homes with you. Thanks for having us. Of course, we're going to get right into the top stories. A developing story. We're going to begin manhunt on this evening for a suspect involved in a vicious attack that left a disabled man beheaded. The incident occurred on Friday by an alleged man of unsound mind who relatives of the deceased say is not mentally unstable. But CVM Live was actually informed by the police that the perpetrator escaped and he may have fled the parish. The police have launched a massive manhunt for the man identified as Howard Monroe. The deceased is Ainsworth Portal. He was wheelchair bound and he is 31 years old. So, Richard, what's very interesting is a similar incident occurred in Manchester several weeks ago with regard to a corporal who was chopped by a man who is said to be of unsound mind. Now, that corporal is resting now at home, recuperating, having had 6 surgeries and with more to come. Yeah,
that happened on Main Street in Christian in the middle of the day. And the man was attacked by a crowd. Well, the man was set upon by a crowd and held. But yeah, another incident seemingly by someone of unsound mind attacking this wheelchair-bound man and decapitating him. Very, very horrible scene. So as you said there is a fear. ACP Clifford Chambers says that there is a fear that if the man is found and held by the members of the community, that they'll employ jungle justice to get their reprisal, their revenge. There's also a fear, a great concern that in Manchester there is a problem with persons of unsound mind roaming the streets, and the ACP said that the government really needs to look at this thing clinically to see how we're treating people of unsound mind within our communities. Yes, the incident of the disabled person being decapitated happened in the small community in Mandeville, of Warwick in Manchester, south of Mandeville. But yes, it's a terrible situation, and it speaks to how we as a society deal with this very difficult issue of mentally unstable people. We don't have any proof to say that this person is mentally unsound, but certainly that's what the residents are claiming. Right, and another man was injured in this incident. His name is Clayton Brown, and he is said to be in critical condition at the hospital. So massive manhunt going on over there in Manchester for this man, Howard Monroe, who is said to be of unsound mind. So if you know him, if you see him, point him out to the police, because this is really, really unfortunate, and his life might be at stake now too. Right, so hopefully the current police indicate that information received led them to the premises where the Smith & Wesson 9mm pistol was seized. The identity of the 6 persons, however, are being withheld by the police pending the further investigation of the matter. The parish has seen an uptick in violence, which we've been discussing this uptick, especially since the state of emergency is going on over there in St. James. But we figured, looking at the trend, that this uptick was under some relative control. Well, again, we need to find out some more, so we have online Superintendent Gary McKenzie, who is in charge of operations. Superintendent, thanks for joining us.
Good evening. I'm happy to join.
What can you tell us about this, the success that you've had? Congrats, and what can you tell us a little bit about that operation and what you were able to do?
Well, we have been continuing operations in the Westmoreland Division. As you very well know, we would have had some challenges in recent times, and so we continue to do our best to impact a number of the gangsters that we know are actually in and around the division. And so yesterday morning we conducted a pre-operation in the Whitthorn area. Men and some other persons who we believe can assist the police as it relates to some murders and shootings that would have occurred, as well as to find illegal firearms and ammunition. Based on our operation, we were able to arrest 4 men, and we seized an illegal firearm. We believe that at least one of them can assist us as it relates to a number of murders and shootings that have occurred in that area. We continue to do similar type operations in a bid to continue our relentless efforts to reduce the number of crimes that have been occurring.
Superintendent, we're hearing that one of the 6 men which we have in custody is a wanted man. He's on the wanted list. Is that so?
Well, this man is one that I would say that is a main person of interest, who we strongly believe would have been committing a number of crimes, and so he's one of them that has been held.
Can you say which gang these persons are related to in Whitton?
Well, what has happened is that in the Whitton area, you would have a number of individuals that have been connected to other gangs within the parish. And they, of course, network with other persons from outside the parish as well. And they would have been committing a number of robberies. And so the Galloway and Bullet Tree area of the Whitton area, those are areas that those persons would have been operating in.
Superintendent, forgive me, but of course, within the context of the state of emergency over there in St. James, a big topic has been criminal migration. Now, you just mentioned that some of these gangs have connections outside of the parish. Do you feel that anyone involved with today's operation have ties outside? Is there criminal migration from St. James?
Definitely so. In fact, there have been some conflicts with connections. And, we would have seen where criminals have been carrying out activities across churches, and especially the fact that there has been clamped down in some other areas to include St. James and St. Catherine North. Just yesterday, you would have heard of the men who would have been fatally shot in the St. Catherine South area, one of whom is from Westmoreland. So that clearly tells us that criminals move around and they network with other gangs and commit crimes in several areas.
SP, final question from me at least. What are the figures today with regard to Westmoreland? What are the murder stats like? We know there was an uptick in crime in Westmoreland. Is it under control?
Well, there is some work to be done. We are a little ahead of what we were last year. And, but what we have seen is that some really positive signs in terms of what we have been able to do. We have been getting assistance from the military. Also, you would have been privy to a number of operations that have been conducted by CETA. And so we have taken some persons into custody, and we are working to get
an attitude entrenched in our culture. It is said that it transcends generations, and it's seen by many as a conduit for crime and violence in Jamaica. You've heard this over and over again, and you might have even said it yourself. Politicians have been labeled as main offenders, but it's gone all the way now to attorneys recently. We've been talking about this in the rum bars, we've been talking about this in your homes, we've been talking about this on the street. But there's a call that's been made for Jamaicans to be proactive in fighting corruption. Anything corruption related that sullies the country's name. But what does this really mean? And that's where we're going to focus the microscope tonight. Are we really choked by the cancer of corruption, as stated by a former Contractor General in 2017? But we have a very esteemed panel for you this evening. Attorney at Law Anthony Williams, CVM Live's legal contributor, Reverend Dr. Devon Dick, former president of the Jamaica Baptist Union, and head of Job Bank Change Agent, Dr. Leakim Semaj. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ashley. Good evening.
Happy to have you.
Yours.
And this is one of Jamaica's favorite topics. Dr. Semaj, we speak about corruption everywhere. As I said, it is one of the most frequently used words in the national conversation. But is it an overused word? Is it a word to which we have ascribed many meanings? What is a concept of corruption, really?
When something means everything, by default it means nothing. And I think in many people's mind is something else other than them, not to do with me. It's those other people. If we can simplify it, we're talking about dishonesty. Now, the other side of it that works in the Jamaican context, I saw a survey some time ago that says Jamaicans' main concern about corruption is when they're not getting their brockings. They have said Jamaican thieves are nice to thief carry a long bag. So we have no problem with it as long as we get in some of it. So that as an abstract construct, because you see, this thing called honesty is an acquired taste. It's a developmental process that comes by socialization. And Jamaica has not yet reached a tipping point where those things are part of our consciousness. It has not been induced, it has not been supported by socialization, and most of all by punishment. If something is wrong, the visual sign is that people are punished when they do it. We don't have too many of those examples.
Dr. Dick, the words tipping point just raised by Dr. Samaj. Now, former Contractor General Greg Christie suggested that Jamaica had reached a tipping point several years ago, and he did this in a 2017 article. Have we reached the tipping point? And I'm asking this within the context of the alleged Petrojam scandal, where donations to the minister's constituency are being discussed, the appointment of a low-level staffer from a financial institution to a high-paying top-of-the-notch $12 million job, allegedly. Are we at tipping point, or is it just a part of our, is it something that we do if we're not getting a part of the proceeds? Is it something that we ball out and say, that's wrong?
I would agree that we're at a tipping point, and we have been at the tipping point for quite a while. The 2017 corruption index showed that we scored 44 to 100, with 0 being most corrupt and 100 least corrupt clean. So we have been around that figure for quite a while.
Dr. Dick,
it is,
you mean a theoretical tipping point? I mean, because the reality is, here in Jamaica, there's no real crisis with regard to corruption in the true sense, because there's no real push. It's a conversation.
There are building contractors who will tell you that if they don't bribe officials, they will not get the plans passed.
But doesn't that mean that we're not really at tipping point in reality? Doesn't that mean that we're just condoning it? It's a part of us, it's fine.
Well, it is systemic in the sense that it is part of the fabric of society, how we operate, and it needs the government to set the tone of anti-corruption, and that all of us will join in the fight against corrupt practices, because there are fraudulent practices that are benefiting a few. It is hindering our gross national product, our output. So if we were to successfully fight corruption, we'd have better economic growth.
Mr. Williams, now, Dr. Dick has just said that the government needs to set the tone on corruption, but is that realistic? Seeing as, if you go outside and you ask 5 people, do you think Jamaican politicians are corrupt? You're likely to get 100% response rate of yes. I do believe that Jamaican politicians are corrupt. How can you give the puss butter, essentially?
Well, you know, a lot of persons limit corruption to politicians. But we first of all have to define what corruption is. It is not just limited to politicians. And based on the definition that I'm going to give you, you will see that it is not limited. Several definitions, but one of which is that it is the misuse of entrusted power. And Transparency International, which is one of the leading organizations internationally, which deals with corruption issues and rating countries, says that in its definition, it is the abuse of power entrusted to someone. And so by this definition, there are certain words that comes to your mind. Manipulation, abuse, falsity, dishonesty, bribery, deception, and a whole list of words. It is not limited to the politician. It's a societal problem. Dr. Dick spoke about it. Dr. Samaj also referred to it. It's something which seems to be permeating in the society. This definition would certainly include the team leader at a workplace. It would include the coach of a sporting team. It would include the administrator at a school or a hospital.
Would it include the attorney?
Oh, of course it would include the attorney. Because, as I said by definition, it is the abuse of power entrusted to someone.
Now, when using the definition abuse of power, it gives a greater responsibility to the government. They have power.
Yes.
Private sector.
Yes.
The employers who not paying the right wages to workers.
Yes.
So once persons are in positions of power,
yes,
they can abuse it.
That's correct.
So we have to deal with the leadership so that they will deal with corruption.
Exactly. By default, it puts the politician at the top of the pile.
Well,
it
does.
Make the rules.
Yes.
They make the laws.
It does, but it does put the politician at the top of the hierarchy, right? And because, as Samaj says, they make the rule, they are in charge of government. But I want us to have a broader definition of and meaning of what corruption is.
Concept of
the concept, all right?
Yes.
And so this leads me now to different factors that cause corruption.
Very well.
One of which is the lack of job opportunities. Lack of job opportunities. And by these persons who are unable to, whether by their educational deficiencies, whether by just simply being unemployed, or being employed but not getting the right scope of work, would then do ways and means to be corrupt.
Hold that point there, Mr. Williams. Dr. Samaj, now you deal with human resource management, transformation, change within the workplace. Do you find on your work sojourns, on your transformational workshops, your outings, from your experience, are you in agreement with Mr. Williams?
Well, partially, you know, the broad definition, yes, but the thing about, I part company when we talk about lack of opportunity or lack of education, anything that causes corruption and so on. Poverty, you know, lack of resources have really, for me, has nothing to do with people being dishonest and thief and so on. That's a whole different thing.
It's character.
There's a character issue. And, but I see it at again, we start at the top. We're almost at a point in Jamaica where people who are self-respecting will refuse to be on government boards because of the level of corruption. And the way the boards are structured, the violation of the basic ways boards are supposed to operate, just the kind of things that happen. So there are many times when I see how corruption works in the workplace, when you're called in to do something, to facilitate some kind of a transformation and so on. But then now you get, there's another story where it can't happen. And it won't happen because certain people have certain other agendas. So even though they say they want this to happen, just go through the motion, pretend like you're doing something. But guess what? We know nothing, because we're not allowing it to happen. So that, Dr. Dick talked about the whole issue of our GDP and so on. So many institutions, many organizations are being stymied because persons who are in power have other agendas other than the ones that are possible and visible.
Dr. Dick, before you pitch in, does this beg the question, do we have the power structure, the hierarchy of power wrong? Because governments are put in by the people. Do we need some kind of transformational agenda in Jamaica to remind the people that they hold the true power as it pertains to government? Is it that, as a populace, we are weak when it comes to advocating for change and holding government accountable?
Well, sometimes the systems in place are also weak. If you watch the American setting, Donald Trump is almost saying that he's an absolute leader. And there are many persons behave sometimes, whether it's boards or politics, parliament, as if they are absolute leaders.
But there's no pushback.
So the Auditor General will make the report and say there are these corrupt practices. And we get the reports over and over, Contractor General, but no change.
Because
So
have
you
the
need
people
to-
advocated for change in
Right, so-
Jamaica? So you brought up Donald Trump, Dr. Dick, and you turn on CNN, you turn on MSNBC, you turn on any of the big networks, possibly aside from Fox, and you see the journalists, you see the panelists advocating for change in a real way. You see movements, waves in the United States
Yeah, but you
around
need to
causes.
change. You need to. Well, I think you'd have to strengthen the legislation, and you're right. We would have to see the people who will fight for the change, so that when you have the legislation in place, everybody's under the law, and people who engage in corrupt practices will be prosecuted and be imprisoned. When we start to see some big fish, real big fish, in government, politics, in private sector, being charged and convicted, you'll see a change.
Mr. Williams, it sounds as if we're waiting for the people to be led, forgetting that the people are really the true leadership of the country.
Yeah, that is correct.
The masses, the 3 million Jamaicans.
But if you look at some basic fundamental things that causes corruption, one of which is bureaucracy. Bureaucracy at various levels. If you take some institutions, for example, primary institutions, governmental organizations, we're talking about the revenue system, the tax system. You're talking about the security forces. You're talking about the customs, yes, and even sports. Now, bureaucracy. Someone goes to a governmental organization. They're not able to get through. They see these massive lines. They hear about these high taxes. So someone is going to import a motor vehicle, and they have to pay $5 million to import a motor vehicle. And they know someone in the system who is willing to take maybe $500,000, right, to get through with the importation of their vehicle. What do you think is going to happen? The whole system of high taxes, the whole system of the length of time and the bureaucratic system, persons are willing to bypass that. Just yesterday, or I believe on this morning's news, the Minister of Justice, Mr. Chuck, spoke about some corrupt practices in the very court. The divorce registry, persons are getting false documents and so forth. Why do you think that is happening? Persons are willing to pay their way out. So, and this leads to the other point, which is accountability.
Okay.
Persons who are given 100 files to work on, and we are not saying that those 100 files must be worked on for the day, but let us say that they are to be worked on for the week. And of that 100 files, only 50, or perhaps a quarter, which is 25, is worked on. Those remaining 75 are not worked on. Persons are willing, because of the system, to pay their way through to these very officials to get through. That's part of corruption.
Dr. Samaj, is it that we have a corruption of character? Is something wrong with our socialization?
No, that's where I begin. Yeah. Because even what will happen, if you get more efficiency in the system, then the tax will less.
Yes.
Right? But there's a character issue.
That's correct.
I deconstruct it. Basic corruption. I agree he's right about the misuse of power, but in the broad sense, it's dishonesty.
That's correct.
Right? Children aren't born honest. Children are tabula rasa, blank slate. Socialization is the process by which we acquire those tastes. And then now, as you get older, then the real issue, when you violate, there's punishment. All the examples that he gave, whether it's in the court system, whether it's the buying driver's license and so on, how often do we hear of anyone being punished? So that people learn that, yes, just pay a man of money, just do this. No, man. Until we have clear behavior is governed by consequences. There are no punishments. There are very few. So that it starts in every level, every election. Look, we went through this thing in Jamaica where politicians were stealing ballot box and election finished the night before the voting and all this kind of thing. We have put systems in place, but yet still the same ones who put the systems in place are trying to undermine it. Every time there's an election, we hear the talk about every election is a by-election, BUY. We hear the T-shirts. Yes. With the money wrapped up inside and the food and all that type of thing and so on, ways of trying to influence. we talk about it in the media and we just leave it there.
Is there confidence, gentlemen, in the new system, the new structures which have been set up by the government with regard to stemming corruption?
You see, corruption, as Samaj says, is a characterization of social behavior.
Correct.
We have to address that. So
is this new structure addressing that in terms of the government?
I don't think so. I think, and when we speak about the government, we're not talking about the current administration. We're talking about government, PNP, GNP in general. Right?
Right.
In general.
Right.
It's a question of an issue of probity, an issue of integrity. We have to teach our young ones from home, from school. That's where it starts. So when they go to the canteen at school and they purchase a ticket, I've seen it, a lunch ticket. Sometimes the very cashier or the person serving who is accustomed to tearing the ticket to show that you have purchased your meal or you got it, and that one was not torn, it fell on the ground, right. And they took it up. It starts from there. These are the persons who are going to be the doctors, the lawyers, the entrepreneurs, the bankers. It starts from there. We have to correct that. We have to promote within the governmental organizations, right? It's because the government is the largest employer.
Thank you for that solution for reform. But Dr. Dick, talk to us now. Trevor Monroe from National Integrity Action has said that there is an uptick. Approximately 80 cases have been reported to the NIA regarding corruption. Now they're saying that this is more than, I guess, the previous year. Does that make you feel heartened somewhat? Do you think that this is something that can catch on? Reporting?
Yes, we have to report. We have to support those who report. We have to be against this informal for dead culture. You know, we must encourage people who are rape victims to talk. We have to deal with that culture. We understand that, as the Bible tells us, the love of money is the root of all evil. We are seeing that people are doing anything necessary to get money, to hold on to it, and to oppress others. We have to have leadership. Leadership is important in anything. We talk about anti-slavery, Sam Sharp. Racism, you had Martin Luther King Jr.
So do we need a corruption martyr?
No, but you have different leaders at different levels. But you have to ask our leaders, who are our servants, to set a certain tone. And when so many of us have information, and we need to pass it on confidentially, so that we can deal with some of the pervasive and systemic corruption in this country.
Dr. Samaj, your final comments. Thank you, gentlemen.
Again, behavior is governed by consequences. And I think you raise the issue about individuals, we the people, rising up. We need some collective action, probably by institutions. The church could do it, because they have the moral force that if they were to consist and persist in it. But the lawyers, because again, they know how the legal system works, but they themselves are having their internal problems. So I do believe that once we start attaching consequences, and people start seeing that the wages of sin is death, they see people, big, important people being arrested, then we will start to take this process serious. But as a character issue, we know we're close to being in a position to stem this nonsense.
You know, I was about to conclude, but Dr. Dick, it would be remiss of me not to ask you, especially in light of what Dr. Samaj has just said about the church and the possible role, the pivotal role that the church can play in stemming corruption, breaking the chains of corruption. Is that realistic? What is the role of the church?
It is realistic that we should have a bigger role, better role. Unfortunately, sometimes we in the church will get sidetracked with minor issues.
The church just talks big. A lot of people feel that the church talks big. What's the church going to do?
But we need to also set a tone in having churches that are transparent, and so that others can see that this is how you must operate, that you're not engaging in manipulating people, and also being able to speak truth to power without fear or favor. Because sometimes you're going to people are going to categorize you as anti-government or anti-opposition, but you must also speak truth to power.
Anyway you take it, it's going to be a leadership issue. We have to lead from in front. We have to have the leaders, the administrators, right? The lawyers, the doctors, the teachers, the pastors, the leaders of society.
Who are not corrupt.
Who are not corrupt. And so we have to demonstrate that level of resilience to good character. And once we do that, right, what we need in this country is unity of purpose, yes. Unity of character, yes. So that once we are unified as it relates to corruption, we're going to have a better society. Because when temptation come, and Reverend Dick will tell you of the various temptations that everyone faces. All right, everyone faces. Okay, and so we have to have that level of resilience, yes. And indefatigability, right, to be hard pressed to say no and to stand up for what is right.
Thank you so much, Mr. Williams, Dr. Dick, Dr. Samaj. I know that they're going to push me to cut right now, but do you have a little grotto? 10 seconds.
Well, again, I just have to concur. It's already said that we have to make sure that start where you are, wherever you are, and all the persons who have people listening to them, working with them. When you can do something, do it.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. A pleasure to have had you on CVM Live, on CVM Television, your news authority. Of course, breaking the chains of corruption. Is it a cancer that we've been suffering from for many, many years? But a collective movement is needed, says our panelists. But we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. Come back for more CVM Live.